Fisheries will always be an important aspect or component of the regional oceans agenda. But I think the issues that begin to face us with regard to external threats to the fisheries resource, not just from overfishing or illegal fishing, but from pollution and other threats. It's these types of externalities, as well as issues of resource allocation, that will increasingly create some tensions within the region amongst our membership. And I think this is one of the reasons why, well, certainly from my own perspective, why I've been keen to see a more coherent integrated oceans policy headed by the political process, because these are ultimately political decisions that need to be taken. And so we've maintained a strong interest. I've certainly maintained a strong interest with Dame Meg in terms of this coherent oceans policy, taking account not only of fisheries but of the way in which we can leverage all of the tools that are available to us to ensure that we're able to secure this region, as well as to know more about it. And I'll turn over to Rajesh shortly in terms of knowing more about this region. But Meg has pointed out the maritime boundaries, and that's important. But without fixing our maritime boundaries under the current Law of the Sea Convention, we face a serious threat that in the event of sea level rise inundating the baseline points, we could lose that area of jurisdiction. Now, just recently, the International Law Association, which is a non-governmental organization, but one that does have some standing as an observer in the UN process, has come out with a recommendation calling on the Secretary General of the United Nations and the UN processes to recognize the rights of the countries that do face inundation of their baseline points, to recognize their current maritime boundaries if they are properly registered as we go forward in the event that they may be inundated. So hopefully that will have some traction in New York, and we look forward to that. But I've also told Meg my view on maritime boundaries goes beyond just the physical boundaries. We have got to look at this region as an ecosystem. We've got to understand what are the oceanographic dynamics that impinge upon this region, and I think they extend perhaps beyond the current borders, but we need to understand the phenomena that may be occurring, for example, in Antarctica, how those would have some impact upon this region, and we've got to have a more integrated and holistic approach to oceans. So I've been a big advocate of the concept of integrated oceans management. I think in this region where we do face these external threats, where we do face issues of internal allocation, or possible internal conflicts of use amongst the various oceanic uses, we've got to be looking at an integrated oceans management concept. I've gone way beyond Meg's OPOC here, so I'll turn over to Rajesh and shut up. Thank you.
Rajesh?
Thank you very much, G. One of the very important themes that came out of the UN conference on the ocean was a realization that we really did not know much at all about the oceans. People were saying that we actually know more about the space than we know about the oceans. And that's true generally. But in the Pacific, I think we realize that we know so little about our own oceans. And unless we know a lot more, we cannot deal with it properly and protect our own interests when so many countries in the world are really interested in what we have in our own oceans. So it's a very contested area where people are trying to negotiate, and you cannot negotiate with any strength unless you know what you are negotiating about. So I think it's very important from that point of view. We know a little bit more about our fisheries and resources, but we know very little about our seabed. And with all these new interest in minerals, etc., we need to really scale up our collaboration and efforts to know far more about the seabed. The risk we face is that many other countries are wanting to send their ships to collect all sorts of information, and they will know far more about the structure of our seabed and what lies there than we will. And I think this is something that the Pacific will need to think about. When it authorizes ships, for instance, to collect data, that data is shared with those countries. There should be very strict protocols. In theory, personnel from the Pacific countries should be on those ships. So I think there's an agenda there in terms of the Pacific taking more charge of really determining the agenda for this scientific research and owning a lot of that data, developing their capacity. And this is where USP does play a role, because one of its functions is to do scientific research. And we are an oceanic people, and we are an oceanic university. So we certainly are going to put a lot more investment in trying to scale that up. And all of this needs human resources. And none of us really can negotiate effectively. None of us can manage unless we have good human resources. So I think those are the things that occur to me to be very important.